He pleased, but his boastworthy teleportation ability was now sealed. This was possible thanks to a series of lucky coincidences. First of all, it's important to note that teleportation requires delicate technique. It requires precise calculations and will not activate if there are any errors in the input information data. What I did was to revise, edit, tamper, and alter that information. To move through space, at the very least two things are required: the coordinates of the current location and the location information of the target point, but I had disrupted the wavelength of the battlefield space, making it impossible to read accurate information. However, this is not an easy matter. Even if I understood the logic and theory, whether it was possible to put it into practice was another matter. Gadra and Adalman alone couldn't do anything about it, and without my there would have been no way to stop Habitaki's teleportation. Here, too, good fortune was at work. Mai had acquired the title Starry Lord, Terra Mater, and was able to fully utilize its powers, which had led to this success. Well, everything was fine up until this point. A bird that can't fly is not just a small fry. Unfortunately, Habitaki possessed powerful enough combat abilities even without relying on teleportation. The Japanese bush warbler was capable of flying at speeds several dozen times faster than the speed of sound. After attacking, it would set its sights on its next prey and take flight because of the time it takes to switch and the time lag between its initial speed and reaching its maximum speed. It is not actually that fast. However, even so, the Habitaki, with its speed and strength, continued to kill and kill like a blade dancing on the battlefield. Without Rumina's revival, defeat would have been inevitable. Oh dear, even though Mai went to the trouble of sealing his teleportation. Who is this? It's me, Gadra. What? He's not a grandpa anymore. This was Mai's first meeting with the reborn, youthful Gadra. She had met him through Yuuki in the Empire, but his appearance was so different that she couldn't tell him apart. Mai was concerned about many things, but this was no time for leisurely conversation. Since she had suddenly joined the battle, she decided to obediently follow instructions. However, there were very few options available. The 100 members of Diablo's Black Corps, or Black Numbers, are under Gadra's command. Since it's a meritocracy, they don't make fun of Gadra for being a newcomer. Moreover, if he were to fail due to petty vanity or jealousy, punishment from Diablo would await him. He fought with all his might against Habitaki, not fearing death. Even though death would mean punishment, Louis was also demonstrating his true abilities, leading a group of just under 400 Blood Knights. Gunter had also put aside his rivalry with Louis and was fighting with all his might alongside them. He was trying to hinder Habitaki's movements, even if it meant staining his body with blood. What they all had in common was that they were not afraid of sacrifice. Each of them gave their all and fought hard for victory. There's no way anyone could ask for anything more. Mai didn't have any brilliant ideas to turn the tide of the battle, but even just blocking one of Habitaki's trump cards was enough to earn her praise. However, that's not the end of it on the battlefield. What do you want to do? Its attacks are lightning-fast slashes. Its wings are made of the ultimate metal, hurricane, and they'll slice through any armor you might have. Adalman, who had left the battlefield, took over Gadra's words. Poor magical defense is useless. I tried a lot of things, but I nearly died. Just as he said, there was a large gash on his shoulder and blood was flowing. Now that he has a living body, he has been injured more often, and Adalman can't help but think that perhaps it would have been better if he had remained a skeleton. Wenti and others were strongly opposed to this opinion, since there was no time to discuss it thoroughly. Adalman had no choice but to do his best in his current form. Therefore, the sacred magic, Wide area superior recovery, great high heal. And wide area part regeneration, great regeneration, were constantly active. Even now, the wound is rapidly healing. Although it was painful, Adalman continued without letting her notice. However, I have learned something. Although that bird is a formidable enemy, it is not that intelligent. It seems to have a habit of targeting anyone who moves, so I think we should be able to deal with it, somehow, if we set a trap. Ahem. Is it a trap? Yes, we will prepare a decoy and have that bird aim at it, just before it makes contact. We will need you to use your powers to teleport it. So you're asking me to be a decoy. You're asking me to be a decoy, right? Hadahoha. Hahoha, it's not that. Mai let out a big sigh. I thought about complaining, but I intuitively realized that the strategy was rational. This strategy wouldn't work if the enemy was intelligent, but it's effective precisely because it's simple, interfering with the enemy's teleportation while escaping on. Your own is difficult, but not impossible. Mai thought there was no other way and agreed to the mission. And the plan worked. Mai's amount of magic essence and energy was considerable, the most in this area. Perhaps she was also attractive as bait, as the Habitaki began to relentlessly target Mai. Thus, with Mai taking on the biggest threat by herself, there was time to wipe out the other magical beasts. Then, the Huryu group, led by Yashichi, Sukaru, and Kakishin, appears. The effects of the recovery magic Adalman had activated were still continuing. The battlefield was stable, and it looked like they could continue on their way to victory, but wow, evolving here is unfair. Just as Mai had complained, Habitaki had transformed into a human form. There was a light of intelligence in his eyes, and it was clear at a glance that he was no simple opponent like before. Mai was able to escape safely because she had the advantage of using her authority. There was no comparison in terms of combat ability, and if she were to fight seriously, she would not be able to last even a minute and would be killed. I feel like this is over. Mai lamented, gazing at Habitaki in despair. In the west, within the midst of the fierce battlefield, there was one area that was relatively safe. It is the base point of the Holy Purification Barrier, Holy Field. There are 8 locations in total. There were 4 locations on the ground and in the sky. Sale, who is in charge of one part of the area, smiles wryly, realizing that this is as far as he has come. Oh dear, it seems the monster has grown even stronger. The 4-legged beast, resembling a vicious wolf, had taken on a human form. Though its size had shrunk, its presence had grown. Clearly, it should have been seen as an increase in combat capabilities. Fortunately, the cliff did not move. The reason for this is simple. He was used to fighting as a beast and was confused by his own transformation. Well, what should we do? Do you feel like running away? This joking remark echoed in Sale's mind. Fritz, who was clinging to the top window of the tower and in charge of the upper barrier, was able to converse with him through the barrier. Ha, don't be ridiculous. You can be scared if you want, but please stop lumping me in with you. Sale retorted. It's not that I don't want to run away. I just know that there's no point in running away. This wasn't just true for Sale, but for all the heroes present here. Yes, even if she was the woman who had once abandoned Sale and run away. You don't have to run, Glenda. With a touch of resentment, Sale asked his former colleague. Glenda looked to be covered in wounds, but her eyes were shining brightly. Her fighting spirit had not yet been discouraged, and she had only come here for some basic treatment. Sale was surprised to see Glenda like that. Glenda is a selfish woman who would abandon her friends so easily. At least, that's the perception that Sale and Gregory have. However, something seemed different. Glenda looked as if she was going to run out without waiting for the healing to finish. It was an unfamiliar sight, hard to imagine from the Glenda of the past. That's why Sale raised the question. Glenda's answer was so unexpected and elegant. Run away. There's no point in even thinking about it. What we need now is to figure out how to make the most of our limited lives. Sale was surprised to hear this. Gregory was also surprised. Hey, is that what you said? Gregory spoke in shock. Sale jumped on the bandwagon. Don't mess with me, Glenda. When we faced that demon, Diablo, you abandoned me and ran away. I won't let you say you've forgotten that. But Glenda is a dignified woman. The situation was different. Back then, I was just a puppet of Rosso, and I didn't have any ideals or causes. Oh, come on. So does that mean it's there now? That's right, but I can't believe you when you say that. Glenda snorted at the sight of her two former colleagues, who were not only skeptical but completely distrustful, as she gave her subordinates a sharp pep talk. She flashed a grin at Sale and Gregory. Such small men. That's why you were so scared of Hinata-sama that you couldn't return to Rubirio's, right? Oh well, you probably won't believe me no matter what I say, so I'll prove it with my attitude from now on. With those words, Glenda returned to the fierce battlefield once again. As they watched, Sale and Gregory looked at each other with complicated expressions. What do you think? Well, I can't believe it. She's changed, hasn't she? Yeah, if I don't admit it at least a little, I'll end up feeling like I'm uncool. Right. The two of them reluctantly nodded to each other. And then, you will be able to overcome your doubts. I will use all my strength to maintain the barrier for even a second longer, even if it means my body being shattered. Oh, I'll protect you for just a second longer. That way, I can buy myself 2 seconds. The reason Gregory hadn't moved was because he had volunteered to protect Sale. While Glenda was covered in wounds, Gregory himself was unharmed. This fact alone made the situation even more awkward. That is why you must give your all to the role entrusted to you. Well done. If only we could buy humanity 2 seconds of their remaining time. HMPH, that's right. They said this to each other and regained their enthusiasm. Meanwhile, the dreaded moment arrived. Preparations for the cliffhanger were complete. Kakashi put his right fist on the ground and assumed a stance similar to that of sumo wrestler. He ran off without putting his left fist on the ground. The acceleration was incredible. In an instant, it exceeded the speed of sound and approached Sale. So you're targeting me after all. I had a feeling that this would happen. Many of the other cryptids in the West were of low intelligence, but the higher-ranking species possessed a certain level of wisdom. An evil intent could be sensed from the Kakashi who controlled them. He has seen through my weakness. He understands that if he can destroy me, he can destroy this holy purification barrier, holy field. Sale prepared himself for death. Even if that happened, he would be able to maintain the holy purification barrier, holy field, and continue to exert his energy, so he continued to refine his sacred power. This was no time to run away, and just because he was dead didn't mean he could run away from his responsibilities. He might be able to return to life after death. But if the holy purification barrier had collapsed by then humanity's defeat would be final. Sale's responsibility was grave. Gregory also bears an equally heavy responsibility. Ewa! He shouted and leapt in front of Kakashi with his halberd at the ready. It was an act that was done with the full knowledge that it could mean death. The all things unmoving that resided in Gregory's trained body had now evolved into the unique skill steel body. The extra skill, all things unmoving, was already a simple authority that strengthened the body and increased defensive power, but now it reflected Gregory's will and strengthened his body even more. Furthermore, he had united with the Earth Knight and War Gnome, strengthening Gregory's body to an unparalleled extent. However, even so, it was an authority that only worked on the human level. I know. Even my well-trained, steel body and hard person won't work against that hateful dog and Ranga. But hey, I'll show you I can buy myself at least a second. Even if they died, there was a chance that they could be revived by the goddess. Ruminas. In fact, a messenger had reported that a resurrection had taken place. On the first move, on the eastern battlefield. This had the effect of boosting morale and removing anxiety from the warriors. But Gregory's judgment was different. Anyone who used sacred magic that borrowed the power of God would understand that there was no way such nonsensical miracles could be performed one after another. There is a limit to the number of times this miracle can occur. It may become possible to exercise it again over time, but that is truly a God only knows situation. Gregory did not rely on such miracles, but simply did what he could carefully. And then, I hope someone survives and passes on the story of my heroic deeds. That was all I could hope for. If anyone survives, it will be a victory for humanity. It was something that he could boast about in the afterlife, that his life had meaning. This is exactly what Ruminas is encouraging. It is a blessing to be able to find value in your own life. As Gregory faces death, his field of vision widens and he has the illusion of looking down on the battlefield to the west. At the edge of his consciousness, his former colleague Glenda was scolding his teammates. Although Glenda has lost her left arm, there is no sign of despair on her face, and she fires the pistol in her right hand, killing one of the strange monsters. You guys, use your heads a bit. It takes 60 seconds to recover. Resurrect once. Every 5 minutes. If you're going to die, then wait until the timing is right. Don't waste God's miracle. Glenda has not given up on victory. If the injuries were minor, they would heal them themselves. But if the injuries were too severe, they would rely on Rumina's miracles. Then they would wait for the right timing to launch a suicide attack, which would likely result in death. Unlike Gregory, Glenda seemed to have already died several times in the battle. You're kidding me. That selfish Glenda is acting like an example to her underlings. Moreover, it seems that he truly believes that the miracle of resurrection can happen again and again. It's incredibly crazy. And yet, he was very reliable. Upon learning this new side of Glenda, Gregory felt ashamed. On top of that, he made a major change in his attitude, deciding that instead of thinking that he would die anyway, he would continue to protect even if it meant dying. The next moment, Kakashi's arms approached Gregory. Ferocious claws that looked like they could pulverize a person were swung down from above Gregory's head. With his awareness still being stretched out, Gregory waited with his steel body fully activated. It's too fast to keep up, so the only thing they can do is put their body on the line to block it. It was synonymous with death, but Gregory had no regrets. On the contrary, he felt like he could stand in his way again and again. However, there is a problem. Right now. Woo-woo. The voice came late. The cliff that was right in front of me was blown away by a sudden gust of black wind. It was a success. Good job, Gabuta. Just as you had guessed, it seems he's not used to moving in human form either. It was the due of Gabuta and Ranga. After arriving on the battlefield as reinforcements, they waited for the decisive moment. If Kakashi had remained a beast, he would have had to use a different strategy. However, now that he had taken on a human form, Gabuta had a certain possibility in mind. It was a bitter memory of their past failures. No matter how much a body is strengthened, it is difficult to handle when it is unfamiliar to the user. No, the stronger it is, the more difficult it is to handle. It was because they remembered that experience that Gabuta and Ranga waited. For that moment, I hid in the shadows and kept observing the cliffs. Then, when he saw the cliff move, he took action. Gregory was used as a decoy, but as long as the results are good, all's well that ends well. Even I had to go along with it, Kumara said, with a dissatisfied look on his face. Since the results were as Gabuta and his men had hoped, they decided to postpone their complaints. They casually cut down the Demon Lord Seed class, cryptid, idol and beast tribe with their tails. It seems like there is a lot of frustration building up, and the ones who took it out were the cryptids. Don't go. Kumara then transformed her tail into the 8 guardians and gave orders. The counterattack began. While Gabuta and Ranga were holding back Kakashi, the battle intensified as they tried to drive out the other packs. By the way, as an aside, I think I've seen that person before. He's the one Rangasan used to play with. HMMMM. He was a tough guy. It is said that such a conversation may or may not have taken place. As for Gregory, who was saved, his situation is also complicated. You've ruined my resolve. This is why I hate dogs so much. Gregory, who would later be known as the immovable bastion of dog hatred, tried to dodge the question with an embarrassed look on his face. In the south direction. In this place, Ultima had the stage all to herself. Unlike Kakashi, Swim has been rampaging on the battlefield since the very beginning. Ultima's efforts prevented this and prevented the damage from occurring. Swims originally swim between the stars of a different world that is vaster than the numerous thousands of universes. Their maximum battle speed reaches sublight speed, and they are a natural disaster that has destroyed countless interstellar nations by leaping through space through gates to another world that they generate as easily as breathing. A gate to another world is a type of teleportation gate, a spatial transfer, intended for ultra-long distance travel on a cosmic scale. By setting these up in various places, Swim can easily travel back and forth between places he has visited once. Although Swim is like that, in terms of existence alone, he is comparable to a dragon species. Its massive size reaches 2,000 meters, even under normal circumstances, and Swim can grow even larger if he so desires. Its speed and destructive power alone make it unparalleled in its ferocity, and it is an existence that transcends the concept of individual combat. Although its body size can be freely changed, it is easy to see with a little thought that it is not suited to activity on land. This fact remains true, even if it is a vast, fundamental world. Still, if Mama calls me, I have no choice. Excited by this first experience, Swim manifested on Earth. Swim thought he had grown to a size suitable for movement on the ground, but it seems he was still too huge. After adjusting his size a bit, he was able to move around comfortably. The distance to the enemy is so short that it would normally be impossible to reach top speed. However, Swim is different. It reaches sublight speed from the start and is able to trample, run over, overrun any enemy it comes into contact with. It's the same this time. Like countless interstellar nations, this planet was bound to transform into a land of death. However, something happened to interrupt this swim. Swim swims across the battlefield at sublight speed. Ultima had predicted this and evacuated those who would have otherwise fallen. Pray. Hey guys, are you taking this seriously? If this thing goes outside the holy purification barrier, holy field, it's all over, you know. Ultima gave such a pep talk as she stood in front of Swim and guided him. He read the direction Swim was heading and set up a teleportation gate along the way. By doing so, he was able to manipulate Swim's path and successfully Stop him in this spot. That's not all. I requested Velgrind's cooperation and had her set up an 8-gate fortress. Velgrind had been trying to recover her stamina by integrating all of her separate body-soul-body strength, but she pushed herself and complied. With Ultima's request, even though she was in the east, she opened a gate too. The place Ultima desired. Are you sure? You must understand that this puts the defending team at a disadvantage, you know. Of course, I understand, but I think it's easier to fight alone than to protect someone who's a hindrance to you. Ultima answered the worried Velgrind without any hesitation. In fact, the swim was in a class of its own. If you think about whether or not it can be defeated, the answer is that even Ultima would find it difficult. However, it is possible to buy time. Rimuru's wish was to have as few casualties as possible, and if he wanted to maintain that, the best strategy would be to bring it to one-on-one combat. At least, that was Ultima's decision. Velgrind also understood Ultima's intentions. She also fully understood its usefulness and complied with her request. And now, Ultima had lured Swim into the 8-gate fortification and was putting up a desperate resistance. Though it is said to have 8 gates, there is actually only one. There is just a vast space that is perfect for one-on-one combat. The swimming was moving freely in all directions within this space. Their target is Ultima, but they have not achieved their goal. From Ultima's perspective, it was just a simple game of tag. I thought so. This guy isn't very clever and relies on brute force, so his intentions are easy to read. Ultima said in a good mood. Swim was extremely ferocious, but that was against an opponent who didn't even try to run away. Swim's attack methods are diverse. The most common methods are direct attacks using body slams or tentacles, but these are useless against opponents that cannot be caught. So Swim changed his tack. Spirit Light Child Water Fish Lightning possess the destructive power to pulverize even a planet with a single shot and are generated from Swim's infinitely regenerating tentacles. They automatically track towards their target at sublight speed and are a sure kill blow, but Ultima has neutralized them. All by using a duplicate dummy, created with magical energy as a decoy. Replicas and dummies have no combat power or anything, they are simply bodies made from solidified magical energy, so they can be created in almost endless quantities. They are meaningless to those with wisdom, but they were extremely effective against Swim. It was here that Swim first recognized Ultima. However, not as an enemy. Instead of just killing time like usual, I wanted to destroy it of my own volition. It was exactly like the thoughts of a child being given a toy for the first time. Swim, who didn't know how to control himself, used his trump card here. If Spirit Light Child Wisdom Fish Lightning doesn't work, then the only option left is the favorite, Quantum Splash. It's Swim's pride and joy, a domain-destroying weapon. Swim has used the Quantum Splash, a quantum distortion cannon, to reduce many star systems to nothing. If life had been born there, they would have had other games to play, but if not, they would have only been a nuisance. In Swim's experience, nothing has been able to withstand the power of this attack. This will be the first time it has been used on land, but it is also a Swim that we are looking forward to seeing the results of. And at an unfortunate time. At this time, a present from Ivilage was delivered to Swim. As soon as Swim finished firing the diffusion distortion quantum cannon, Quantum Splash, he transformed into a human. A powerful blast ravaged the south. The 8-gate fortress that Velgrind had constructed could not withstand the pressure from within and collapsed. Since Velgrind herself was not the core, it was possible that there was a weakness in terms of strength. However, it was an undeniable fact that an abnormal phenomenon occurred that defied the laws of physics. The reason that a large number of people were not killed was because Ultima had issued a warning just before the collapse. In response to this, under the command of Veyron and Zonda, 200 members of the Black Corps, Black Numbers, deployed a complex barrier to protect Mulan. Naturally, Misora, Khan and his subordinates, as well as Meadle and the others, are also cooperating with this. They overcame differences in power and showed flawless teamwork. Furthermore, Velgren was twisting the space. While he was in the east, he sensed something was wrong and quickly steered the main current of the impact towards Tensukaku. It was a good decision. This prevented the holy purification barrier from collapsing. Still, the damage is enormous. Within the isolated, limited space of the 8-gate immovable formation, an immense amount of energy raging on a scale that could destroy a star system. It was an unimaginable force, and if it weren't for the Axis world, a stage that boasts a strength far beyond that of other dimensions, not only would the 8-gate immovable formation have been wiped out, but the planet itself would have been wiped out without a trace. That's amazing. Velgrain broke out in a cold sweat. He acted as soon as he sensed the spell collapsing, but the results were all thanks to him observing Ultima's actions through the spell. If it had been left unattended, it's frightening to think how much damage would have been done by now. Still, there was no doubt that it was the best move. Ultima's basic policy was to simply buy time. He never tried to defeat Swim, but maintained a safe and effortless fight. Swim became impatient and took violent action. From this situation, it was apparent that Swim's intelligence was extremely low. An extreme attack in a limited space is an act that could potentially get him involved as well. The fact that he does it without any hesitation, pause, or hesitation makes it clear that he has no consideration for the consequences whatsoever. However, these kinds of enemies are troublesome. This is because reason and logic do not apply, making it difficult to formulate tactics. If they were weak, it wouldn't be a problem at all, but the worst thing was that they were comparable to true dragons. Even Velgrind was racking her brains over how difficult it would be to deal with them. Moreover, there seemed to be a change in his swimming style, and he had become much more powerful. By taking on the form of a human, a young girl, the density of her power has also increased. He appeared in the ruins of the collapsed building with a calm and nonchalant look on his face, seeing as he was unharmed even after being caught up in the collapse of the 8-gate fortress. It seemed that a half-hearted physical attack would be useless. On the other hand, Ultima was in such a terrible state that it was a pitiful sight to see. Her stylish military-style outfit was torn in places, and her beautiful bare skin was covered in scars. Such wounds should heal instantly, so this was proof that the damage was so severe that it was not possible for this to happen. Veyron and the others were beginning to worry about whether the young lady was okay, but when they looked into her eyes, they became worried for a different reason. Because he was pissed. You have the nerve to hurt me. You even took my favorite outfit, which was a gift from Rimuru-sama, and now you've done this to me. Just die already. His tone was flat, and his eyes were serious. By this time, reinforcements led by Benimaru had already arrived. The group stationed in the south were the Kurenai, Red Flame Squad, but Ultima was giving off such an ominous, sinister, and ominous aura that they had mistaken them for the enemy. Thanks to Hakuru's leadership, they didn't commit any foolish acts like accidentally firing friendly fire, and that was undoubtedly a stroke of luck. In any case, from that moment on the situation changed completely. Ultima's mind shifted to Swim, intending to kill him. Ultima and the girl like Swim were surprisingly similar in stature. They both have the same adorable feel, So much so that it makes you wonder if Swim modeled his character after Ultima. However, in the case of Swim, the eyes are cloudy and lack light. Perhaps because of this, his expression is creepy and somewhat horrifying. Incidentally, Ultima has a side ponytail, but Swim has long hair that reaches down to her waist. Looking closely, the tips of each strand of hair are eerie, wriggling, and moving like tentacles. At first glance, his entire body appears to be naked, but it is actually covered in armor made from scales that are harder and more flexible than biological steel. Arionium. It was clear that it was not a human. Ultima and Swim faced each other at close range. The difference is clear. If we were to convert it into existence value, Swim's existence would be more than 20 times greater than Ultima's. No one thought that the match would succeed, except for Ultima's subordinates. How foolish to anger our king or princess. This was the common understanding, shared by everyone. Well, anyone who knew Ultima would recognize that this was a battle with an unpredictable outcome. On top of that, it was predicted that there would be considerable damage to the surrounding area, so the formation was reconstructed. To deal with that, before that even happens, the fierce battle begins. Swim, using his newly acquired limbs, attacked Ultima by imitating what he had seen. To a certain extent, he had shared Ivalade's knowledge with her. That's why he was able to land a fairly good punch. An ordinary person cannot even see it. Even the heroes gathered here couldn't even comprehend what was happening. However, that speed was overwhelmingly slower than sublight speed. Swim's true strengths are his lightning-fast flight that maximizes energy efficiency, his wide variety of destructive attack methods, and his strong body that can withstand them. However, now these advantages have been lost. Swim is unable to use his unfamiliar body and is unable to exert his full power. In that state, there's no way he'll be effective against Ultima. The moment Swim's punch touched Ultima, it became a counter and was returned to him. Swim was astonished. Swim, an overwhelmingly powerful creature, far superior to other life forms, had never before received a noticeable counterattack. Swim was able to store an endless supply of energy by breathing in the magical elements floating in the other world. He could use that energy to convert it into propulsion, and from the surplus energy he created Spirit Light Child Soul. Fish Fire Lightning, storing a stock of over 1 billion within his body. However, because the basic performance was so amazing, there was almost no need to use them. A Space Alliance fleet, sent by some interstellar nation to fight against Swim, was annihilated by simply spreading out a molecular cutting blade network, molecule Messer, that had been transformed from tentacles and running through it. Even if there was a barrier that neutralized any optical weapon, it could not prevent a mass attack that was hidden by its ultimate hardness and aggressiveness. On the other hand, even if they strengthened their defenses with mass, it would still be nothing but a fool. There was no need to use Quantum Splash, the super explosion of spirit, light, child, fish, lightning could be used to defeat them in an instant, without the need to use Quantum Splash, the super explosion of spirit, lightning, fish, lightning. So this time too, it's a new game for Swim. That's what should have happened, but something seemed to be different. Of course, the answer is simply, it's the other person's fault. Moreover, for Ultima, it was a life-or-death battle where pride was at stake. Since she was not prepared from the start, Swim fell far behind. Swim took a stance that was now fairly clear and delivered a punch. The punch was also wrapped up in a super-compressed demonic energy, aura, so the power was truly impressive. However, despite receiving a direct hit, Ultima remained calm. He dispersed the force throughout his body and counterattacked, without losing momentum. This is the pinnacle of martial arts. It's not just that he could have been hit by a bullet train without any injuries and still be unharmed. It's a completely unfair realm that even ignores the laws of the world. Ultima's current skill and level had surpassed even Damrata's. I hope you regret making me angry. Ultima said this with an evil smile. Emme. Rumina's soared through the air with determination, showing no signs of exhaustion. Regularly activating sanctuary resurrection would be a foolish act that would make anyone question his sanity if it were his true self. Even though she was using the brains of those who believed in Rumina's to distribute the calculations, no, it was the opposite. She was concentrating all of the results in herself, which was putting an unimaginable strain on her. This battlefield has been transformed into a sanctuary, maximizing the effects of all magic. Even Rumina's would be unable to do this without compensation. However, if we don't do it, we will surely lose. Without anyone knowing, Rumina's continued to support the heroes fighting on the battlefield, hiding pain so great that the term self-sacrifice seemed trivial. Moreover, Rumina's also makes sure to observe the battlefield.